late. I feel so fancy.
Who are the people you can't make jokes about?
Muslims.
Muslims?
You know, it's a religion of peace. There's a PC over there, there's a PC over there.
Can I just say, I love John Cleese and his laugh.
You've probably heard jokes like this about Muslims.
And Jews, and Christians, and Hare Krishnas. I mean, the punchlines are all tailored towards each religion, of course, but Muslims and Islam aren't all that special. Well, save for the danger in making such jokes, of course. But we're getting to that, aren't we?
But you probably haven't heard jokes like this from Muslims.
One of my classmates came up to me one morning and she was like, dude, I got like really stoned last night. I was like, oh my God. What did you do to piss your dad off? That joke kills in Saudi Arabia, guys.
Yeah, getting stoned by your dad. Oh man, it kills in Saudi Arabia. That is a thing that happens. That is a thing that our comedian's religion fundamentally prescribes as a punishment for extramarital sex in several hadiths, and is enforced in several Islamic countries as a matter of law, be it governmental or tribal. Funny joke, though. But, gosh, how do you get away with saying something like that?
My name is Ayman Ismail. To grow up Muslim means to grow up being feared.
Does it? Well, if you say so.
So I'm traveling the country to find out for myself if there's really any reason to be afraid of American Muslims.
American Muslims? Well, by and large, no, not really. Now, the ideology they practice, defend, and or make apologies for? That is indeed something to be concerned about, given the state of things in the rest of the world.
What happens when you mock Islam? This, right?
It is a risk to publicly mock or criticize Islam or its icons, yes. Many, many people have died as a result of it.
After the Charlie Hebdo massacre in France in 2015, an activist hosted her own Draw Muhammad contest to protest Sharia law. 2 violent extremists with guns showed up. That was only 2 years ago in Texas.
Violent extremists? I think you meant fundamentalists. But so, yes, between Charlie Hebdo and Pamela Geller, and certainly the Danish cartoons disaster in 2005, there is a non-irrational concern over the public mocking or criticism of Islam, even in America. So, maybe I'm confused. You're presenting these examples to dispel that notion?
We've seen attack after attack around the world based on the extremist belief that people who criticize Islam are blasphemers, and they should be punished with death.
Fundamentalist belief, not extremist. Fundamentalist. It's wordplay like this that becomes passive apologia and contributes to the obfuscation of what Islamic doctrine actually teaches. And what is the prescribed punishment for apostasy and certain forms of blasphemy in the Quran and the Hadiths? Well, it is death, isn't it?
Many anti-Muslim activists say they receive death threats and fear for their lives. This fear has become so pervasive that it's now a pop culture punchline.
You'll be drawing today.
All right.
A pop culture punchline. A punchline making fun of something that is demonstrably true and scary. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Are you complaining about facts surrounding Islam being made into punchlines? If so, what about punchlines like,
I got like really stoned last night.
The factions that hold these beliefs are very real. The consequences can be horrific. But comedy routines like these have created a broader narrative about all Muslims.
I kill you!
all Muslims? Says who? You? So, are you opposing the mockery of Islam, or defending it? You opened this with a Muslim making a getting stoned joke.
That Islam is antithetical to Western life, partly because it smothers free speech with violence.
Is that not true in many Islamic countries? Is that not something supported elsewhere by those who would vilify anything said critically of Islam as Islamophobia?
They say that satirists, artists, and comedians are some of the most vulnerable. So tonight I'm at this place where a bunch of Muslim comedians are going to be challenging that narrative.
Hold up. Muslim comedians are going to challenge the narrative that artists, comedians, and satirists are the most vulnerable in mocking Islam. In the United States, in New York City, in one of the most culturally liberal areas of one of the most free nations on the planet. How very, very brave.
This is the Muslim Funny Fest, a comedy festival co-founded by Dean Ubaidullah, a Muslim talk radio host, about 3 years ago. He's frequently on TV defending the rights of critics to say whatever the hell they want.
Everyone should have the right to join the Prophet Muhammad. This is America. That's the freedom we have. And the freedom is to counter their words with our words, not violence, ever.
I do very much appreciate that sentiment. And of course, Dean Obadiah would never advocate for violence against someone over their opinions. No, never. But that aside, how is it that Obadiah can say those things about Islam? Is it because the doctrine of Islam would agree with him? Or is it because he lives and speaks in the United States, which is not an Islamic theocracy?
Dean co-founded the festival with his longtime collaborator, Maysoon Zayed. Tonight is their R-rated show, billed as their Haram night. Haram is what Muslims call something forbidden by God.
I have a question, and it's not specifically tied to Islam, but to religion in general. If you openly and explicitly revel in doing or not doing things that are antithetical to the teachings of your proclaimed religion, why would you say that you're a follower of that religion? Isn't that entirely disingenuous?
Muslims we found could care less about cursing or people joining the Prophet Muhammad or anything. I mean, in America, they're living their lives.
Yes, they are in America. If you're so confident in disproving the restrictive and frightening image of Islam and the mockery of it, why aren't you performing this show in Tehran, in Riyadh, or in Doha?
And anytime I did shows in the Muslim world, I was always uncovered. Not naked, but like what you see right now, like the Lost Kardashian. And I never, ever censored myself.
Every time you've done your show in the Muslim world, you dressed like that. Well, it is true that our speaker here is credited as the first Muslim woman to perform stand-up in Palestine and Jordan. So, good for her. So, does that mean that it is not a risk to openly mock Islam? Or are the people at Charlie Hebdo not dead anymore?
We're doing jokes. We're making people laugh. I'm not going on stage and blaspheming Jesus, Muhammad, or Moses. But I will tell a Jesus, Muhammad, Moses joke.
Great. I am happy you feel free to make whatever jokes you like about whomever or whatever you like. Isn't it wonderful that you have that freedom? In America, in New York City, in front of a sympathetic audience.
Comedians and artists aren't supposed to be able to mock Islam. That violates Sharia law, right?
Right?
Yes. So, thank goodness none of these performers are doing their routines in a country or community that actively enforces Sharia law.
Still, here are some people who should know that the best, the children of Muslim immigrants, and they're doing it. The audience, which was also mostly Muslim, loved it.
Wow. They are mostly Muslims. In America, that knowingly chose to come to a comedy show starring other Muslims, telling Muslim jokes without fear of inherent danger or reprisal. Wow, that's great. Can they do that in Iran? Can they do that in Saudi Arabia? Can they do that in Afghanistan? Can they do that in Paris?
I
found out that the holy month of Ramadan was happening, for example, because it was trending on Twitter, I did wait until sunset to go down on my boyfriend.
Go down on your boyfriend? Oh, so you were engaging in sexual acts while being unmarried. And your audience is laughing. I think it's great that you can joke about that stuff. Honestly, sincerely I do. Though such an admission would likely have you being given 100 lashes with a whip at best, or stoned to death at worst, in other parts of the world. And you know the people doing that to you? They would be calling themselves good Muslims.
People have an ability to contextualize things and you know, not always. I'm not saying that you don't have the fanatics out there who see a cartoon and go crazy.
Right. Fanatics. Not fundamentalists. Fanatics. But yes, they do exist, and it is a danger. In the Netherlands, in France, and even in America, as you've already pointed out. But even if reprisals for mockery don't result in death and violence, what is the other fate for those who would criticize Islam in this country? Well, being branded Islamophobes and racists. The fear of speaking out against or in jest of Islam is social, as well as physical.
Do you ever have to feel like you have to hold back?
I do if it's like a religious show. Back in Canada, I had to do a religious comedy show where the imams were sitting in the second row, and they wouldn't even look at me.
Huh. So there is something that stifles your sense of freedom among some Muslims, even in a Western country. Even you feel the fear of displeasing someone who might be more devout in the faith than you are. Funny, that.
I get so annoyed with the Charlie Hebdo stuff. Some Muslims reacted in such an extreme way. Whereas like when the Taliban killed God knows how many kids and shot Malala in the face, like, are you protesting in the street? Like, that's when you're supposed to protest in the street and not like freak out about a freaking cartoon.
The Charlie Hebdo cartoons were a violation of Islamic doctrine. The killing of children by the Taliban and the shooting of Malala was done in the name of Islamic doctrine. Why would devout Muslims protest the killings and not protest the cartoons? What are you talking about?
The comedians shrug off embarrassment, much less any threat from the extremists.
Fundamentalists.
But I also know plenty of perfectly average Muslims who wouldn't take too kindly to some of these jokes.
Oh, you would? So there is something to be concerned about. I am getting some very mixed messages here.
So I actually figured out that apologizing before you tell a joke really helps the joke.
Apologizing before you tell a joke. Now, I really hope that you're joking, because if not, that really doesn't help the idea that you are challenging the aura of fear around mocking Islam.
Muslims actually want to laugh at everything. They just don't want you to tell them that you think this is right.
Muslims don't like having their worldview challenged. But isn't that the very issue at hand?
I never feel like I have to worry about a fundamentalist reaction because I live in America.
Yes, exactly. And that means there are places in this world where that fear would be real, even for you, a proclaimed Muslim. So, again, what notion is being challenged here?
That's why I think being Muslim in America is the best place to do it. Yeah, okay, there's all this stuff, there's bans, there's this and that or whatever, and all this politics, but I think we get to be ourselves in a way that we can't anywhere else, and I think that that's why our parents came here, because they want to be American, because they feel like that's the thing that would allow them to be Muslim.
Or perhaps to allow them to escape the tyranny of fundamentalist Islam, so they could practice a more moderate form without fear or risk to life and limb. So, isn't there coming to America, for that very purpose, an acknowledgement of the inherent dangers in blaspheming Islam?
The routines tonight didn't erase the threat here or anywhere else.
Stop. What was your thesis statement again?
They say that satirists, artists, and comedians are some of the most vulnerable. So tonight I'm at this place where a bunch of Muslim comedians are going to be challenging that narrative.
So, this comedy show that you hailed as a counterpoint to the inherent dangers faced by artists, comedians, and satirists did nothing to erase the threat here or anywhere else to artists, comedians, or satirists. Got it.
But they did remind me that speech critical of Islam happens every day all around America. Funny Fest is pushing a lot of the same buttons as anti-Muslim activists.
Anti-Muslim activists, not anti-Islamic activists. So people criticizing Islam are insulting the adherents to the religion, not the religion itself, you say. But, okay, these comedians are pushing the same buttons as the anti-Muslim activists. So, why aren't these comedians then also anti-Muslim activists? What's the difference?
But here, it's not about some defiance of Sharia. It's about letting American Muslims laugh at themselves.
But are they not in defiance of Sharia by mocking the religion? By laughing at its teachings? By telling stories of premarital sex? By women in the audience or on the stage not protecting their modesty? How is this not their being anti-Muslim activists by your own definition?
Everyone here recognizes that some Muslims lash out violently for speech like this, but nobody here felt threatened.
Muslim performers before a sympathetic Muslim audience in the city of New York in the United States of America didn't feel threatened. Well, what if the comedians were Jewish and they were mocking Islam? What if these same Muslim comedians were performing in Tehran, or Riyadh, or Doha? You say this as though it is proof of something. It only underlines the fact that the danger really does exist.
And when I asked what would happen if their conservative relatives heard these jokes, I got similar answers. Their families came to America so that they could do exactly this.
Okay, I am really not sure what to make of this presentation. It begins by promising that this comedy show will challenge the idea that artists, comedians, and satirists are vulnerable to the dangers of critiquing or mocking Islam. But then we are given ever-increasing evidence and testimony to show that there is a threat, as if we didn't already have evidence of that, as provided by our own presenter. Where you are in the world, and to whom you are doing your mocking can indeed mitigate or even outright eliminate the threat of violent reprisal for mocking Islam. But the danger still exists. In the Middle East, in the West, and anywhere where Islamic fundamentalism resides in the hearts of the faithful. I have no idea in the world what you meant for me to get out of this piece, Slate. But the last thing you have provided me is peace of mind. As always, thank you for watching.